The first experiences of birds of prey was when I was going to my art classes from school, and we went to Tully House. And in Tully House they had a bird room, which was full of cases of birds. And the cases that fascinated me, the ones with birds of prey in it, particularly the peregrine falcon. And I just absolutely stood and stared at that for hours because it was fantastic, the beautiful birds. I knew it was the fastest bird in the world, and I knew it was the top of its food chain, and I knew it had to kill other birds to provide itself with food. And that was the start of me being interested in birds of prey. The next situation was, well, I was still at school as a 14-year-old, being taken to a crag where peregrines nested. Unfortunately, at the time, the peregrines were at the lowest ebb, and there were no peregrines about. That was 1950. In 1963, we'd only 6 pairs. And of that 6 pairs, only 3 were rearing young ones, and they only reared 8 young ones. Now, at that rate, they were on the verge of extinction in Cumbria. That was because of the start of use of toxic chemicals in the form of DDT, aldrin and dieldrin after the Second World War, when the Ministry of Ag were encouraging farmers to use it to improve their yields at the farms. But what they didn't realise at the time was it was actually poisoning the environment. And in effect, the seed dressings that were covered in toxic chemicals being eaten by small birds, which had again been eaten by bigger birds. Those bigger birds were being eaten by the peregrine, which is the top of the food chain. And consequently, the toxic chemicals built up in the peregrine's system and really affected the central nervous system. And in effect, they became sublethal doses where they laid thin-shelled eggs. It became a race against time in the 31-day incubation period, whether they would actually hatch the eggs or break them and eat the contents. And Derek Ratliff was a deputy director of the Nature Conservancy Council, who was actually working on the monitoring of the peregrines. Derek Ratliff was asking me to go down the crag to the nest ledges and see if we could find any evidence of eggs being laid and broken or eggs stolen, because even then the egg collectors were coming in and stealing eggs. And if they did hatch, they were stealing young ones. And we were literally sleeping out overnight under some of these crags to protect them. So we knew that taking the adult eggs for analysis was very important to find out just what levels of toxic chemicals there was in the environment. I collected all the eggs in the Lake District. Well, over the years, when I was abseiling into nests, if there was deserted eggs, I'd take them and send them off to the Institute of Terrestrial Ecology at Abbott Ripton near Huntingdon. And in the early days, they were finding high levels of DDT, aldrin, dieldrin, they're derivatives of DDT. They're finding heptachlor, they're finding mercury and PCBs, which are all toxic. And this is when the peregrine became an environmental indicator. If we could get rid of those chemicals in the eggs, we'd know that the environment was becoming cleaner and cleaner. It was Derek Ratliff who did all the work on this, and he Well, he saw birds actually breaking eggs, so he knew what was happening. And he went round all the museums in the United Kingdom, measuring and weighing the eggs in collections in these museums. And with the eggs that we were sending him, he found that they were weighing less, and it proved that the birds were laying thin-shelled eggs because of these toxic chemicals. Derek Ratty fought tooth and nail with the Ministry of Agriculture and the chemical industry to ban these chemicals. And they eventually agreed to a voluntary ban in 1964. That was strengthened with another voluntary ban in 1966. And then after that, the chemicals stopped being used internationally because of studies further afield which said that they were bad for the environment. In fact, they're banned now. Well, I saw a change in the peregrine as a result about 1968 when birds started appearing back at the sites. The first sites to be recolonised were the traditional sites, the ones that we knew of in the 1930s. And it gradually built up year on year with the sites being reoccupied. And Falcon Crag, which is the one of only 2 Falcon Crags in the Lake District, was reoccupied in 1972. And that shows you, by that time, the environment was becoming clean. As the population increased, my activity with them increased, and the number I was monitoring increased dramatically. I was literally running around the fells with a rucksack on my back with a rope and a steel pin in it, a climbing harness, trying to get round as many peregrines as I could. From monitoring 7 or 8 pairs, I was monitoring up to 22 in the 70s and up to 30 or 40 in the 80s and 90s. It was just so fantastic to see the birds there, because the first thing that happens is you're going up to the crag and the bird comes off screaming at you, literally screaming at you. You know then that the site is occupied, and then you have to find out where she's nesting, which ledge she's nesting on, and if she's got eggs. So the only way to do that is to abseil down to where you think the nest ledge is, and if the eggs are there, I was marking them. Then the RSPB asked me to use a special code with a secret marker pen, and if these eggs were stolen, we could tell, and we had some very good prosecutions as a result of this. What we were doing was just something worthwhile. I was doing something that mattered, helping these birds to recover from the very low ebb that they were in the 50s and early 60s. It was exhilarating to see the recovery of the peregrine population from the terrible fear that the population was going to become extinct, to find out that with the highest density of peregrines for anywhere in the world, never mind the UK, in Cumbria, was something that I was very, very proud of. And I feel it ought to be recorded, and I have recorded it. I've been responsible for ringing 1,347. Of those, I personally have ringed 1,152.